Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Truckloads of medical supplies are waiting at the Gaza border to be delivered to so many impacted by the war between Israel and Hamas. Federal Tory leader Pierre Poilievre says thanks to 8 years of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Canada's homeless problem is increasing amongst the middle class. And one of the founding members of Greenpeace speaks out against climate alarmism and explains why he left the environmental activist group.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Israel's defense minister has told his military to prepare for a ground assault on Gaza, but hasn't said when that will happen. Israel has tens of thousands of troops along the border following the October 7th cross-border massacre by Hamas terrorists. The news comes as the World Health Organization says it's ready to enter Gaza with 5 truckloads of medical supplies if the Rafah border crossing with Egypt reopens on Friday. U.S. President Joe Biden says he hopes this aid will make it to the residents of Gaza and not fall into the hands of Hamas.
This has been a very blunt negotiation I've had, and so we want to get as many of the trucks out as possible. There's, I guess, 150 or something there. Not all of them will go. The first tranche, if there's a second tranche, see how it goes. The commitment is, if in fact they cross the border, the UN is going to be on the other side. If Hamas confiscates it or doesn't let it get through or just confiscates it, then it's going to end, because we're not going to be sending any humanitarian aid to Hamas if they're going to be confiscated. That's the commitment that I've made.
The U.S. State Department has also issued a worldwide caution. Officials are warning of more potential terrorist attacks and violent demonstrations around the globe as the Israel-Hamas war intensifies. The terrorist organization Hamas has blamed an Israeli airstrike for an explosion at a hospital which killed up to 500 people, including many children. The Israeli military, however, says the medical center was hit by a rocket misfired by Hamas.
هناك أكثر من حوالي 3000 شخص. هؤلاء شكل هذا المكان لهم ملاذا آمنا. خلال فترة عملنا في هذه المشفى دون أي سابق إنذار وحوالي الساعة 6:30 تقريبا استهدف المستشفى بقذيفة لا نعرف ما هي، ولكن عرفنا مدى نتائجها باستهدافها الأطفال الذين قطعتهم أشلاء والذين قطعتهم أجزاء.
Quebec Liberal MP Samir Zuberi says the Hamas attack in Israel caused the latest crisis. He says, however, that a solution is not possible to end the war as long as Israel continues to drop bombs on Gaza. Winnipeg Liberal MP Ben Carr says a ceasefire is complicated by the fact that the terrorist group Hamas still has Israeli hostages.
We have to recognize clearly that bombs are falling on innocent children, adults, seniors, being launched from the Israeli military. We need to recognize that. So I myself was a soldier in the Canadian military. I was trained in the Geneva Conventions. There are rules to war. I know that civilians are dying.
Do you think Israel is
responsible? And if I was behind an artillery cannon and I knew this would fall on hospitals and schools, I would not push that trigger. But there have been about 20 hospitals that have been hit during this strike.
Yeah, I think the issue right now in talking about a ceasefire, which obviously would lend itself to a result that we all want eventually, which is peace. The issue is that Hamas is still harboring hostages that it took from Israel during the attack. That's one issue. The second is Israel has a right to defend itself, and in part of that defense, it means helping deal with the structure of the current Hamas regime. If that regime is not dealt with, then as time goes by, they will simply rebuild. They will rebuild stronger, and Israel will be a threat again.
The former Premier of Manitoba has had her Instagram account hacked. The profile picture on Heather Stephenson's account was changed to what appears to be a member of Al-Qassam Brigades, which is the military wing of the terrorist group Hamas. Stephenson's Instagram bio was also changed to a pro-Palestinian slogan, and the account posted an image of a map of Israel with the words "Free Palestine." Matt and Stephenson are now working to try and figure things out and retrieve her account. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says more Canadians are losing their homes. He says thanks to 8 years of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government, our country now has a new phenomenon, which is the homeless middle class.
We used to just have young people living in their parents' basements. Now we have parents moving into their children's basements. Will the Prime Minister reverse the inflationary policies that doubled housing costs and are forcing seniors to move into their kids' basements just to avoid going homeless?
Canada has a AAA credit rating, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and low unemployment. And in addition, we will always be there to support the middle class, Mr. Speaker, whether it is 6 million old age seniors with the old age security benefit, whether it is 11 million Canadians with the grocery rebate, whether it is 4 million Canadians with the business supports. Mr. Speaker, what we do on this side of the House is invest in Canadians to build a stronger economy day after day, year after year, and we will continue on that course. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcomed his Jamaican counterpart Andrew Holness to Ottawa on Thursday. The Prime Minister is hosting the Canada-CARICOM Summit, says the working relationship between Canada and Jamaica remains strong. Trudeau says both countries believe that climate change needs to be addressed not only here, but around the world.
The way we've been working together and need to continue to work together, not just on shared and bilateral prosperity, but on regional and even global issues. From the very beginning, whether it's been you and I working together on the UN initiative for financing for development and looking at the global financing architectures in ways that shift the flow of capital to at-risk middle-income countries that are vulnerable to climate change or other challenges, to draw in the UN as an important part of that conversation was something we worked on for a number of years together.
Canada has been a very good friend to the region and to Jamaica, particularly now in the age of great concern for issues having to do with climate change and climate financing and development financing in general. And we're very grateful to have the support of Canada in fora in which we don't sit, but in which important decisions are made which affect our people. So we're very happy to have your voice on our behalf.
The Assembly of First Nations launched a new national climate strategy in Ottawa. It aims to incorporate Indigenous knowledge, rights, and self-determination with other governments. It also seeks urgent and transformative climate action that includes First Nation solutions.
This past summer has been the worst fire season in Canada on record. Over 15 million hectares have burned, affecting First Nations from coast to coast to coast. This is only the beginning. Projections indicate that Canada's temperature is expected to warm at double the global average rate and triple in the north. This means that more extreme weather, including fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, species migration, coastal sea level rise, among other challenges.
You know, there's one environmentalist who believes that there is no climate crisis. Former Greenpeace founder Dr. Patrick Moore even wrote a book on the subject called Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. Dr. Moore says we're seeing some extreme weather events right now, but not extreme climate change.
The climate has been changing over the many, many millions of years. But since 1600, which was the peak of the Little Ice Age, when it was really nasty, the River Thames was froze freezing over year after year back then. The last time it froze over was 1814, before we were even using any significant amount of fossil fuels. The world started warming again in 1600, coming out of the Little Ice Age to today, over 400 years, more than 400 years, the temperature has risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius as best we can measure.
Dr. Patrick Moore will also explain why he walked away from Greenpeace. Catch that full interview coming up later in our broadcast. Well, it was a gorgeous day across much of southwestern Alberta today. Angela Stewart is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Angela, we had better enjoy these beautiful fall days now since a cooling trend is on the way?
Yeah, I hate to say it, Hal, but we got snow on the way for our region. Things are going to start cooling off starting this weekend with that snow kicking in. So take in those warm, hot temperatures as much as you can, because the white stuff is on the way for Lethbridge. Speaking of warm temperatures, we reached a high of 24 today, down to a low of 11 degrees tonight. Lots of sunshine today, so that was great. That's the same deal for tomorrow. 17 the high tomorrow, and down to a low of 5 degrees for Friday. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Angela. A private member's bill by Conservative MP Ed Fast, which would have not allowed mental illness to be included in medical assistance in dying, was defeated in Parliament. Bill C-314 would have amended the criminal code to provide that a mental disorder is not a grievous medical condition for which a person can receive aid. Now, to chat about what this means for our country in more detail is Alex Schadenberg. He's the Executive Director for Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, and he joins us now from London, Ontario. Alex, your thoughts on Bill C-314 being struck down and what it really means for Canadians?
Well, I'm very disappointed that this bill was struck down, but at the same time, I have hope because 8 Liberals voted for Bill C-314, and that's important because the Liberals were really pushing that every MP needs to vote together, and you had all of the NDP voting in favor of Bill C-314. So when you start looking at that, you see there's a clear division in Parliament right now, and hopefully it can lead to further changes to the law, but I can only hope that there's going to be further changes to the law. The government did announce, though, that they're going to reconvene this special committee on medical aid in dying. That doesn't provide me a lot of hope, though, because that committee is stacked with pro-euthanasia members of Parliament and senators.
So where does your group go from here?
Well, we're actually deciding that we're going to be contacting the provincial ministers of health, the provincial attorney generals, etc., because, you know, they're dealing with medical aid in dying as a healthcare issue. Therefore, there is direct provincial involvement in this question, how you're going to regulate this. And I think it's very possible, especially since Quebec, for instance, has very different laws on medical aid in dying than the rest of Canada. It's very possible that individual provinces will be willing to regulate this.
Thanks so much for your time today, Alex. That was Alex Schadenberg, Executive Director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, joining us from London, Ontario. Rape myths were debunked on Thursday morning by way of an art installation that was created back in 2013 at the University of Arkansas. Staff with the Sexual Violence Action Committee met with members of the Lethbridge media to discuss the recent project. Now, we must warn you that the piece of art creating a conversation about sexual assault could be triggering for some viewers. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the story.
We need to take a deeper look at what we're actually doing for victims who have been victimized.
What Were You Wearing is a project that helps tell the stories of sexual assault survivors and is meant to let them know that it was never a specific item of clothing that caused the assault.
We need to highlight what services are available for those people that have been victimized. We need to really even call on agencies to make sure that we're doing proper training around trauma and how we respond to trauma, so that we are truly trauma-informed agencies when we're supporting people who have been victimized. I think we need to do some broad-scale work around active bystander engagement as well, so that people aren't sitting back and just letting things happen, but we know how to have those conversations and how to intervene if something might be happening. I would love to see that we do some work potentially with places that are serving alcohol. We still know that alcohol is a really big contributor to sexual violence in our community, that a lot of times that people apply someone with a lot of alcohol to get them drunk enough so that they can violate them.
The Sexual Violence Action Committee was started around 20 years ago to help provide supports and services to victims of sexual violence in Lethbridge.
I hope people are moved and that they see it in a new perspective. The idea is to dispel rape myths, and I encourage everyone to have a look at the poem, What I Was Wearing. It's a powerful poem, and I think the point is, if we could only end rape by changing our clothes, if it was only that simple.
The art installation will be open to the public at the Sandman Hotel on Mayor McGrath Drive until Friday afternoon. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, for the first time ever, the Lethbridge Police Service is selling canine calendars with 100% of the proceeds going back to local organizations. Now, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the service's canine unit, a 12-month calendar will show all of the police canines and their handlers. Constable Steve Zwartpel explains how this idea came to be.
It's kind of been tossed around for a few years, actually. And when we sat down last fall, prior to coming into 2023, we said, well, how can we celebrate the history of the service with the dogs, and something that we enjoy to be part of every day, so it's an opportunity for us. That's where it initially started, and it kind of just built from there of, okay, how can we use this to benefit, again, some organizations that give a ton of their time and resources and that rely on private funding, so as a way to give back. So that benefit to celebrate, as well as a benefit for these organizations that give so much of what they have for us.
What a great idea. LPS has 4 dog teams, with the service getting their first canine back in 1964. The calendars are available to buy for cash at the front counter of the police station. Coaldale RCMP are investigating following a string of vehicle thefts in Colehurst. Police say in the early morning hours of Thursday, 3 vehicles and a trailer were reported stolen from 4th Street and 6th Street in Colehurst. They include a blue 2004 Chevy Silverado, a white 05 Silverado, and a white 2007 Chevy Silverado. A red 2021 Royal enclosed trailer was also taken in the heist. Police are asking for witnesses to come forward to help with their investigation. If you saw something that can help police, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-TIPS. Flashing lights and police tape enclosed a strip mall in northeast Calgary following a shootout which saw a police officer injured and 1 suspect killed. Police say tactical team officers were executing a high-risk warrant when the shooting began.
I would like to start by saying it's never easy when one of our own is hurt while answering the call to serve Calgarians each and every day, which is what they do. As we all know, our members regularly attend challenging and dynamic calls that can escalate quickly. Our members are certainly trained well and trained to uphold public safety at all times, even when encountering dangerous situations. Our member was transported to hospital in stable condition. 1 suspect was transported to hospital and, despite life-saving efforts, was declared deceased at the hospital. Another suspect was taken into custody. We can now share that the suspects were previously involved in other firearms-related offenses, which is why our tactical unit was present for the arrest. I can also tell you that there is no current threat to the public.
The Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission is asking the province to reconsider its proposed pronoun legislation. The group says it infringes on the rights of students. The Commission says that invoking the notwithstanding clause to override the provincial human rights code affects the rights of minors. The bill would prevent kids under the age of 16 from changing their names or pronouns at school without parental consent. Heather Cote resigned earlier this week as a commissioner, calling the legislation an attack on transgender and gender-diverse youth. Now here's something you don't see every day. A security camera set up at a home in northwest Connecticut caught video of a bear breaking into a home, opening the bottom drawer of a freezer and helping himself to some lasagna. The bear then made its way out of the side window to enjoy its newly acquired lunch. Fortunately, there was no one at home at the time of the break-in. And there he goes. Well, it was a spectacular fall day here in Lethbridge, nice being above 20 degrees once again. The warmer temperatures, however, are on their way out. Full weather details are coming up. It was t-shirt and shorts weather in Lethbridge once again today, as we saw over 20 degrees. Not a bad autumn day whatsoever. Angela Stewart is in now with all of the weather details. Angela, we better enjoy the warm weather while we can, since the white stuff may be on the way?
Yeah, it's best to take in as much of the warm conditions and temperatures as you can, because we do have snow on the way for Lethbridge and surrounding regions. It's going to start cooling off this weekend and then also heading into next week. But before that, we do have a couple days where it's going to be fairly decent conditions starting tomorrow. 17 the high expected with lots of sunshine for tomorrow. Cooling off slightly, cloudier conditions for Saturday. 15 the high for Saturday, Sunday, and then cooling right down to a high of 1 for Monday. That snow kicking in there Tuesday, Wednesday, 0 the high, and -1 for Tuesday, Wednesday, midweek next week. Our average high for this time of year is 13 degrees. Our average low is 0. 28 degrees was the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 1974. Minus 12 was the lowest temperature back in 1949. Our sun rose at 7:59 this morning, expected to set at 6:33. That puts us at about 10 hours and 34 minutes of daylight for today. Okay, so temperatures and conditions across the country now for Friday. 15 the high for Victoria, mix of sun and cloud there expected. Mid-teens expected in Vancouver. However, it will be a little wetter there. They're expected to maybe see some afternoon showers. Nothing really to complain about in Edmonton and Calgary. Those low teens, 12 and 13 for Calgary. That's expected to remainder for the rest of the week and cooling off as we are starting on the weekend and midweek next week. Some winds to be expected if you are in Saskatchewan, specifically Saskatoon and Regina. 14 the high and 15 for Regina. Wet conditions in Winnipeg expected for tomorrow. Some afternoon showers to be expected with some winds as well. 16 the high in Winnipeg. As we're looking to the central part of the country, rain is kind of what we're seeing for a majority of central Canada, specifically Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. 15 the high, 16 for Ottawa, and 18 with a mix of sun and cloud for Montreal for tomorrow. Kind of the same deal for Atlantic Canada. 16 with about 5 millimeters of rain expected for Fredericton. Lots of sunshine in Halifax, so good news if you are there. Charlottetown, a mix of sun and cloud, 16, and rain to be expected in St. John's for tomorrow, and a high of 14. And that is a look at your full weather forecast.
Canadian companies are dealing with a higher incidence of cybersecurity attacks than other countries. That's according to a survey by consulting giant EY. It suggests 81% of Canadian firms experienced at least 25% cybersecurity incidents over the past year. That compares with 73% globally. The worldwide median cost of a breach jumped 12% to $2.5 million US. More than half the time, they say it took an average of 6 months or longer to detect a breach. The Competition Bureau says profits and markups have increased by quite a bit over the past 20 years as the state of competition has decreased in Canada. The Bureau's recent report analyzed how competition has evolved across industries between 2000 and the year 2020. It finds that large firms are facing fewer challenges from smaller competitors and fewer new companies trying to find a foothold. Commissioner Matthew Boswell says the report highlights the need to modernize Canada's competition law and for governments to adopt pro-competitive policies. Desjardins Group says it is cutting around 400 jobs. The financial services cooperative is citing heightened volatility, inflation, and the potential for an economic slowdown. A company's spokesperson says Desjardins is also still looking to recoup the benefits of its massive investments in recent years, especially in technology. The layoffs at Desjardins amounts to around 0.6% of its workforce. It comes a day after Scotiabank announced layoffs of around 2,700 staff. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 101 points on the day to finish at 19,348. The Dow was down 250 points to 33,414. The S&P 500 was down 36 on the day to 4278, and the Nasdaq was down 128 points to 13,186. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.97 to $90.29 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to $2.96 US. Gold was even on the day at $19.7446 US an ounce, and silver was up 15 cents to $22.99 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.53 per bushel, barley's at $7.40, canola's at $15.90, and corn is at $8.51 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.33 to $184.40. Feeder cattle were down $3.55 to $243.58. And lean hogs December contract was down 3 cents to $68. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.87 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a private member's bill by Tory MP Ed Fast, which would have not allowed mental illness to be included in medical assistance in dying, was defeated in Parliament. Bill C-314 would have amended the criminal code to provide that a mental disorder is not a grievous medical condition for which a person can receive MAID. Instead, it was voted down. Is there an actual climate crisis in the world today? Is the Earth warming at an alarming rate that is causing danger to all of mankind? A former co-founder of Greenpeace says no. Hear the thoughts of Dr. Patrick Moore, who wrote a book on the subject called Fake Invisible Catastrophes and the Threats of Doom. That Q&A with Dr. Moore is on deck. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. This Halloween, grab a friend and join Trick or Eat Lethbridge. This event is a great opportunity to help out the Interfaith Food Bank. Simply register at Trick or Eat Lethbridge Facebook page and go door to door on the assigned route on October 31st and collect non-perishable food items. It's fun for a cause. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
You know, we've been debating climate change and whether or not there's an actual global emergency for quite some time now. What are the actual facts and what is fiction? Joining us today from Comox, BC to talk about it is Dr. Patrick Moore. He's a doctorate in ecology and is one of the co-founders of Greenpeace. He has since left the organization, is now director of the CO2 Coalition and author of the book, Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. Dr. Moore, welcome to Bridge City News.
Nice to be on with you, Hal.
Thank you so much. So first of all, what made you decide to leave Greenpeace, even though you were one of the co-founders?
Well, I left it after 15 years in the top committee. I was on the first voyage against U.S. hydrogen bomb testing in Alaska, which we won against the world's most powerful organization, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. And then we went after the French atmospheric nuclear testing in the South Pacific 2 years in a row, and we got them to stop testing nuclear weapons in the atmosphere. Then we switched completely. Paul Spong, a whale scientist, came to us and said they're killing 30,000 big whales every year in the middle of the Pacific, and you guys are the only ones who know how to go out in boats. Because we had sailed across the North Pacific to the Aleutians in the case of Alaska, and we sailed from New Zealand to the French Polynesia, 2,500 miles, wow, 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And so we said, yes, that is a very good idea. And a lot of the people in Greenpeace at the time said, whales? What are you talking about? We have to save the world from nuclear war. But we thought we'd already done our bit, some of us. And we also, instead of handing out death and doom and gloom on one hand, we decided to let out the beauty of nature and to go for nature, because that's the green in Greenpeace. The peace is, of course, not ending up in a nuclear war. And so we went out on the ocean 4 years in a row against the Japanese and Russian whaling fleets and eventually stopped it altogether by lobbying at the International Whaling Commission. And so we won that too. And there's very few big whales being killed in the world today. And then we went after the 250,000 baby seals being clubbed while still nursing at their mother's breasts off the coast of Canada. That wasn't very popular in Canada because they saw it as some kind of national pride. I don't know why, because we would never do that with land animals, with mammals like bears. We wouldn't let them murder all the young while they're still nursing. And so we won that one too, eventually. It took 5 years. And then we switched our campaigns to pollution, toxic waste being dumped in various places. And at that time, the United States and Canada had already adopted pretty good water and air pollution rules, but Europe had not. And we had a lot of countries in Greenpeace in Europe, France, Germany, Britain, Netherlands, and others. And so we focused on the rivers of Europe, which were basically rendered dead by factories putting their waste through pipes underwater in the rivers. And this was true of the Thames as well as the Rhine and the Elbe and many other big rivers in Europe. And we had the riverboat go up with divers, go down and plug the pipes. And then the waste would back up into the factory. And the media thought that was pretty funny. And also, it got us attention. And that was what we knew how to do, was to get attention. Today, these guys are like a bunch of college kids on a summer cruise. They don't even come out of their offices to talk to anybody anymore. And they're all with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and all this net zero crap. And that isn't why I left them. I'll go back a little bit. They've degenerated far further than when I left them. When I left them, they were starting to call humans the enemies of the earth, the enemies of nature, as if we were the only bad species on the planet, which is a bit too much like original sin for me. I'm not a fundamentalist in that sort of sense. And so I had to leave because of that. But I didn't leave at first because I was so dedicated to the movement. But then my fellow directors, I was one of 5 international directors from 79 when we created Greenpeace International to 85 when this happened. They decided, none of them having any formal science education, they decided we should have a campaign to ban chlorine worldwide. Now, it is true that as an element, chlorine is dangerous material. It was used as a weapon by the Germans in the First World War, chlorine gas. But I said, you got to be a little more nuanced about this, you guys, because table salt is sodium chloride, and it is an essential nutrient for all life. And in addition to that, adding chlorine to drinking water was the biggest advance in the history of public health to prevent water communicable diseases like cholera. And thirdly, 85% of our pharmaceuticals are made with chlorine chemistry, and 25% of them have chlorine in them. So come on, guys. If you want to ban something that's chlorine, fine, like DDT, that had already been banned. It's a chlorinated hydrocarbon. But they didn't know their chemistry and they didn't know their toxicology, and I couldn't teach it to them. They just wanted to do this campaign because it would make lots of money.
So Patrick, do you believe that the planet is actually seeing a climate emergency, which we see so much in the mainstream media right now? And if not, why?
Well, the first thing is to see is there isn't an emergency now of the climate. There are weather emergencies, tornadoes and hurricanes, floods, droughts. That is weather. The climate is the average weather. And the average weather shows no increase in hurricanes, no increase in droughts, no increase in floods. The sea is rising 2 millimeters a year in places where there were no glaciers during the most recent glaciation. Where I live, the sea is receding because the land is rebounding from the glaciers having melted faster than the water is rising. And those are tide table figures. So, and not only that, 2 millimeters a year, you're not going to have to run in order to escape the sea. And if you're really that worried, hire the Dutch, because they have 25% of their land below sea level, producing more food than any other country in Europe. So there are solutions to all these issues. And the solution for extreme weather is to harden our infrastructure so that it doesn't get knocked down by high winds, to control floodplains, like the floods in New Orleans were because they didn't put proper ditching and waterways in there to take care of that, or don't build your towns where it floods. And as far as droughts go, they've been happening since the beginning of time. They come in cycles. There was one that lasted for 200 years in the US Southwest, which is why the Anasazi people, the cliff dwellers, disappeared, because there was not enough water for them to grow food for themselves, and they never came back. And so that was 1,000 years ago. So yes, the climate has been changing over the many, many millions of years. But since 1600, which was the peak of the Little Ice Age, when it was really nasty, the River Thames was froze freezing over year after year back then. The last time it froze over was 1814. Before we were even using any significant amount of fossil fuels. The world started warming again in 1600, coming out of the Little Ice Age to today, over 400 years, more than 400 years, The temperature has risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius as best we can measure. But one of the big problems and the big controversy right now is what's called the urban heat island effect. Urban landscapes are only about 2 to 3% of the Earth's area. That is where almost all the weather stations are. There are some in urban areas, but they're just being counted in with all the urban weather stations. And there is no doubt that cities make it warmer in the city because of the concrete and the heating that's going on there in the buildings. So the winter temperature in a big city is much warmer at a weather station that's in the airport or the middle of the city than it would be if that city wasn't there.
You know, we keep hearing over and over again that CO2 is causing global warming and climate change. And I understand that you believe that there is no long-term evidence that CO2 is causing increased global temperatures. Can you explain?
CO2 is a greenhouse gas, but it is an extremely minor one. And therefore, there are many other factors, including the sun and water vapor and the clouds, which can completely override its effect for hundreds or even millions of years. If you look back at the record of global temperature for the last 500 million years, how do we know that? By marine sediment cores. Drill down into the bottom of the sea, and you can find proxies for the temperature and the CO2 and all kinds of other factors. It's amazing what science has been able to do. So we know for sure that CO2 has been out of sync with temperature more often than in sync with temperature over the last 500 million years. And even if you look at the last 400 years, 450 actually, back to about 1550, when they first invented thermometers, which would accurately tell you what the temperature was. Before that, you just have to say it's quite cold or just nice or quite hot. They had nothing to measure temperature with before then. So since then, in central England, there has been a continuous measurement in a number of meteorological sites of the CO2 and the temperature. Sorry, not of the CO2, of the temperature, because there wasn't any increase in CO2 until about 1850, starting in 1550. The graph shows very clearly that there has been no increase in the rate of warming over the last 400 years, even though around 1900, CO2 started to go up in an exponential curve and just completely outstrip any change in temperature. So in other words, an exponential increase in CO2, a doubling almost, has not caused any change in the rate of temperature since 1600. And from 1600 to about 1850, 1900, there was no significant CO2 emissions.
Wow. Now, our federal government is on a campaign to achieve net zero carbon emissions over the next 10 to 15 years. Much of the plan focuses on wind and solar power, wind and solar energy. What are your thoughts on green energy sources right now, Patrick? Can we really count on them? Are they reliable?
The first point is green is a color. It is not a scientific term. Leaves are green, and then they turn brown.
Yeah.
So when you call wind and solar green, what part of it is green? The wind, okay, let's call the wind green. Let's call the sun green. Sure. But the windmills and the solar panels are not green. They are made from minerals like everything else is, like nuclear plants are made from, like gas plants are made from. And they don't last anywhere near as long as the other major producers of electricity. They got a 20-year lifespan at best. They're having a heck of a time with windmills breaking down and having to be replaced. The blades are failing. And you know what they do with these huge fiberglass blades? Cannot be recycled. They bury them. They cut them up and bury them, so no one will see them. It is insane to call wind and solar green. Green, okay, let's call agriculture green because it produces food and life, right? If you want to say green has to do with life. But green has nothing to do with machines.
What are your thoughts on nuclear energy, though? A lot of people are quite concerned about nuclear energy, but a lot of people feel it's better for the environment. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's better for the environment if you're worried about CO2 emissions. It's also better for the economy if you're worried about running out of fossil fuels someday. We could replace 50% of our fossil fuels with nuclear energy in about 40 to 50 years if we really went at it. Because nuclear energy can be used for anything that requires electricity or heat. And that is a lot of the energy. Whereas airplanes and trucks, you can't put a wire on them. Right? And so nuclear has to be used mainly with things that are stable, except all large ships could be nuclear powered. Russia has 6 nuclear icebreakers, and 6 countries have nuclear navies with submarines that go underground with 100 nuclear missiles, underwater, for months with 100 nuclear missiles on them.
Wow.
If we can do that, we can run our whole fleet of tankers and cargo ships with nuclear power too. It's not very difficult to run a nuclear reactor. It was pretty hard to invent one. It took a while to figure out how to do that. But once you've got a nuclear reactor, it's no harder than running a steam plant. You know, it isn't. It's just technical. But let me make this comparison. 1.6 million people die in road accidents every year in the world. This includes pedestrians, but they were road accidents because of moving objects. Not one person has died in North America in the 60 years that nuclear plants have been running here, over 100 of them. The only nuclear accident that caused death was Chernobyl because they made a stupid mistake and let the thing blow up. And it's the only class of reactor that was capable of blowing up after making a stupid mistake. Fukushima killed no one. 20,000 people were killed by the tsunami. And in the middle of the situation, CNN put a headline up on the TV saying, "Nuclear crisis deepens as bodies wash ashore." That was their headline. You can't find that anywhere on the internet anymore. They probably know what a horribly stupid and nasty thing that was to do with 20,000 people dying from a tsunami that had nothing to do with the reactor.
Dr. Patrick Moore is the director of CO2 Coalition and is as well author of Fake Invisible Catastrophes and the Threats of Doom. Dr. Patrick Moore, thanks so much for joining us today from Comox, British Columbia.
Thank you very much, Al.
You know, nothing feels better than waking up after a great night's sleep. Yet, there are some disorders that can hamper that awesome feeling you experience after several hours of lovely rest. Lena Walsh is a local sleep expert, and she has dedicated her career to help people overcome insomnia and other sleep disorders. With years of experience in the field, Walsh developed effective protocols that can help individuals get the restful and rejuvenating sleep that they need to lead healthy and fulfilling lives. Lana, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Of course. Now, first off, can you just share your experience in your quest for sleep?
Yeah, well, my quest for sleep lasted a really long time, about 30 years.
Wow.
I remember as a kid tossing and turning so much at night, and I'd have to get out of bed to rearrange my clothes because they'd get wrapped tight around me, and it would drive me crazy. And over the years, I started to develop troubles, ongoing troubles with staying asleep. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd toss and turn for hours. And some nights couldn't go back to sleep at all. So during 30 years, I've been sleep tested. I'd seen a sleep expert. I'd been on a decade's worth of medication with no solution. And then by complete happenstance or maybe divine intervention, I found the solution to insomnia, which is actually the gold standard in treating insomnia now. So using this process of behavior change completely cured my sleeping problems. And it's been an amazing 3 years of sleep. I can't even tell you how incredible the last 3 years have been for me.
Well, I'm really interested in hearing more about that. But what was the feeling like of not being able to find like that really like helpful rest?
Well, I tell you, there's a lot of things that happen when you don't sleep at night. First of all, you just feel exhausted all the time. For good sleepers out there, I explain it like if you ever had a newborn baby at home and you remember how exhausting it was every day for the first months that the baby kept waking up every 2 hours to eat, that's what insomnia is like. even when you have a good night's sleep, because you get those every once in a while too, you still feel exhausted all the time.
Right.
But some of the ways that it affects you, though, is mostly in your brain. Like your brain is most affected by sleep. It happens quickly too. Like one night of bad sleep will make you moody. I was very irritable. You didn't even want to look at me in the mornings because I might take your head off. I was just so grumpy all the time, right? But you get brain fog. Your memory kind of goes. One of the biggest things that I noticed when I started sleeping better was my memory. Because I would have a conversation just like this, and I would come up to a word that I wanted to say, and I couldn't think of the word.
Oh.
And then now I don't have that problem anymore. Or if, I had a stressful night and maybe had a bad night's sleep for whatever reason, that'll come back right away. That's the first thing I notice that goes for me. So there's just like your brain it really affects the brain when you can't get a good night's sleep.
Now, this must have been a challenge for your family. Like, what can you tell us about the impact of lack of sleep and our relationships?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was grumpy and irritable all the time. You did not even want to make a joke about me being tired. You didn't want to make I'm not a morning person. You're not a morning person. You said that to me. I wanted to punch you in the throat. I really did. You don't have patience. So there's an American Academy of Psychology found that getting less than 8 hours of sleep made you almost twice as likely to lose your patience and yell at your kids. So because you're irritable all the time and you don't feel good and you have no energy, you just don't care. You have this, I don't care what you want. I don't care about anything. Just shut up and don't talk to me. Don't look at me feeling. And when you're doing that with people that you love the most, it can be really hurtful.
Now, what about workplace relationships? Is there like a way to tell when a coworker has like a lack of ability to sleep?
Yeah. So one of the ways you might notice it is people that are like drinking lots of extra coffee in the afternoon, because in the afternoon our energy levels dip automatically, even if you are a good sleeper. But if you're a poor sleeper, that afternoon dip is very significant to the point where they might be falling asleep at their desk or in a meeting, right? They're moody. Their moods will go up and down depending on how well they slept the night before. So you'll notice that as well. They do small mistakes, like they're sending that email without the attachment regularly, or hitting reply all instead of just reply. Like those kinds of little mistakes, they will be a little bit irritable or grumpy. They might snap in certain situations, especially if there's a difficult client or difficult coworker. They're less able to handle that. They may take longer to complete tasks, like something that would normally take them, they would do pretty quickly, and all of a sudden it's taking them longer. Extra sick days. I probably took twice as many sick days as the average person because I just have such bad nights of sleep that I just couldn't function. So those would be some of the things that you would notice.
So in the workplace, do you think that there are things that employers or coworkers might be able to do to help a colleague that has insomnia?
Well, I think the biggest thing to do is to just, when people are saying, I'm tired all the time, is to ask them, like, what's that about? Like, how long has that been going on? Is there, and ask them if they're sleeping okay, like directly ask them. Because I can tell you in my experience, I didn't tell people I had insomnia. I talk to people now who worked with me 10, 15 years ago, and they say, I had no idea you had insomnia, Lana. So I never told anybody. It's not, you can't phone into work and say, I didn't sleep last night, so I can't come into the office. It's not perceived as a valid excuse to take time off.
So how do you open up that conversation then? Like saying like I have insomnia, like at work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would just ask them when somebody's saying to you, like, I'm tired all the time, I would just ask them, like, well, how are you sleeping? And, do you know if you're getting enough sleep, or do you know if maybe that might be a problem for you? Because I knew I had insomnia. I was reading everything I could find online, but I couldn't find a solution. And if you know somebody that could help them, then give them the opportunity to say, hey, I know this is bad. I know how hard it is, but you know what? I heard about this person who helps people do this, and give them that opportunity. Because when if I told somebody, actually, I should say this. The one time I told my boss that I had trouble sleeping, she asked me why I couldn't just close my eyes and go to sleep at night. That's the kind of advice you get from people who don't understand what's happening. And so you don't tell anybody because there's no reason to tell them. So if you're listening to this, you can say to people, hey, you know what? I know somebody who's actually a specialist in this and can maybe help you. Because what I do is considered the gold standard in treating insomnia, but it's only been that standard since 2016. So lots of medical professionals out there don't even know about this treatment.
So let's talk a little bit about the treatment now, because you've obviously overcome a lot of things, and I really want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so what research has come to realize is that insomnia is a learned behavior. What happens is we start out having trouble sleeping for a variety of reasons. Mostly it's stress related. Stress is the number one reason people can't sleep, and even good sleepers will have trouble sleeping when they're under stress. And that's completely normal. But when we have trouble sleeping and it goes on for weeks or months, what happens for a certain part of the population is they start to get frustrated and anxious, and then they anticipate not sleeping. So then every day they're thinking about sleep all the time. And am I going to sleep tonight? And is tonight the night I'm finally going to get a good night's sleep? And because we're so exhausted every day, we start to engage in a bunch of behaviors and habits to help us survive, but actually contribute to our insomnia.
Oh.
So then what happens is our subconscious brain starts to associate bed and nighttime with being awake. So just like Pavlov's dog learned to salivate at the sound of a bell, we've done the same thing with sleep. For insomniacs, we get this hyperactive part of our brain that won't shut down at night. And it just keeps us awake through the night. And so the treatment is to reprogram that subconscious brain. And that involves sleep education. So just understanding that little bit, right, helps. It's understanding how sleep works, why things are happening the way they're happening, and why you should do something different, specific strategies to do at night, and then stress reduction and relaxation techniques. That's the whole process into a step-by-step plan that gets you back on track.
So how does technology affect our sleep and our ability to sleep? Because a lot of us we'll go to bed and we'll stare at our phones, we'll check our Facebook, we'll check our Twitter, we'll do a bunch of Instagram stuff, and that's probably not really healthy for us, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's the one side of it is blue light affects melatonin production. It can stop melatonin production. So on that hand, blue light too close to your eyes has that effect on you. So use the night vision, or where you turn it to a black screen, or blue light blocking lenses can help that. The bigger problem with using your phone and being on Instagram is scrolling has been shown to give you a dopamine hit, which elevates your senses, it elevates your excitement, it makes you energized. So it gives you a boost as opposed to helping you calm down and relax. The other issue with certain media is it can also be stressful, right? If depending on what you're consuming at night, I tell people all the time, whether it's on a phone, in a book, a TV show, you have to be careful of what you consume at night. Don't have those really deep conversations with your spouse in bed. Don't do work at night, because it really activates your brain and it can cause a stress reaction. And that stress reaction is part of the reason why people can't sleep. So be careful of what you consume at night, not just because of the blue light, but because of the information that's coming out of that device that you're looking at.
So prior to going to bed, is there a certain amount of time you should shut off your phone or put it away before going to bed? Would you say an hour, 2 hours? What would you recommend?
Well, I recommend at least an hour, but it's really up to you. I also tell people, if watching TV helps you go to sleep at night, then watch TV, right? I don't want people to just all of a sudden change their habits because, of some recommendation. I want you to get your best sleep. So do the thing that helps you go to sleep, but you should be doing something relaxing. If you're not giving yourself that opportunity to settle down, to get out of active functioning time to go to sleep, it's going to be harder to go to sleep. So I do recommend like a half an hour, shut off your phone and do something relaxing like reading, because that will help your brain settle down and get into that mode of ready to sleep, because it needs that time to just come down from the day.
Right. So we've talked about taking technology away, like an hour before sleeping. What are like other things that can help someone fall asleep and have a good night's rest?
Well, I think one of the biggest things you can do is stick to a routine. When your circadian rhythm runs on a 24-hour clock. And so when you disrupt that rhythm by going to bed later or sleeping in or going to bed too early, it really disrupts that natural rhythm. So the first thing is to pick a bedtime and stick to it. And then give yourself a routine of things that you do before bed that you do every time you go to bed. Because your brain craves that routine, and it will start to learn, just like we learned how not to sleep, it will learn over time that, okay, this is the pattern that we follow before we go to sleep. So for me, it doesn't matter what time I go to bed. If I was out drinking and partying, I read at least 15 minutes before bed. I might not remember what I read, but I'll do it. But I read at least 15 minutes before bed because that is my routine and it actually puts me to sleep.
Oh.
So just finding that thing that you do and do it over and over and over again, and that will help you fall asleep faster.
Wow. Okay. So Lana, we're just about out of time, but if viewers want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, I'm on all the social channels at Lana Walsh Coaching, and my website is lanawalshcoaching.ca. So you can find me on any of those, and I'd be happy to chat with you if you want.
Great. Well, that was Lana Walsh. She joined us from her office in Lethbridge. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.